start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Stream is about to start. Are you ready for the stream to start? Am I live? Am I live? LNG. I think I may be. Now it looks like I have something wrong with my resolution, but this week is going to be an issue because something happened to my computer. Anyway, so this is very exciting. I'm going to welcome in just a second the William Shakespeare of war games, Mark Herman, onto the stream, and he's going to teach me something about war games because I know nothing about anything, and especially war games. So we're going to do that. But first of all, we're going to have a chat with Mark about his new book that he's come out about his game design process. So I'm going to throw over to both of us. Mark, how are you? Are you well?
I am well. It says on air, so I guess we're on air, huh?
I think we're on air. And
Okay.
and somehow, I'm not quite sure how it happened, but my vetting process didn't work, and Uli Blenneman is somehow on the stream. Why would they let Uli Blenneman in, Mark? I don't understand.
Hi, Uli.
Give me a second. I'm just trying to... Oh, no. Something's happening. This is... I'm wonderful with technology. Give me a second.
Apparently so.
Okay, so... To begin, can you tell us something about this new book that you've written?
Well, for starters, I will show it to you because it's actually printed. And can you see that?
I can see that.
Okay,
War games according to Mark.
There you go. And the book is, for some reason, is held up in customs in Oakland for reasons that I have no idea. But it's customs. But it'll be shortly at the GMT warehouse, and then there'll be people who have pre-ordered it will get their copies. I would say that by the end of November, people will have copies in their hands. So before Christmas.
And so give us a précis of the book then. What's it about? And more importantly, why did you feel now was the time to write it?
Oh, okay. So I'll start with the second part first. So I have a dear friend named Peter Perla who recently passed away. He actually wrote one of the forwards to the book, actually. And about a year-ish or more, not too much longer than a year ago, he said to me, I've been writing this column for Roger McGowan in C3I magazine. I'm not sure most of you people know this magazine, but I've been writing a column on game design for about, more than a decade. And he was reading one of my columns and he said, you should, use this as the basis for a book. And so I looked at it and I actually had at that point about 75,000 words, but the book is not, this is what the book is not. The book is not an anthology of my C3I articles, but I used the structure of the topics as the chapter, if you think about the chapter structure for the book, but with some new content. The two pieces of new content is I always get asked, and by the way, I want to be very clear, the book is about how I design historical war games. It's only about historical war games. It's not about all games. It's not about all war games. It's not about conflict games. It's about historical war games and how I do it. So it's not a how-to book for somebody who's not me, but at least you would understand how I do it. And there is some new material about how I have a couple of, how I make prototypes and how I, have developed product. And I've done it enough times that I think I have a pretty good clue. And then there's a historical section on 3 periods that I feel very comfortable in, being 5th century BC, Aegean, Greece mostly, the American Civil War, and World War II in the Pacific. So there's 3 historical chapters on designing games, how I design games in those periods. So, and that's kind of the gist of the book. It was a great fun to do, and it's got lots of, I don't think I can riff it. Let's see here. But you can see it's got a lot of illustrations. And the one thing that is in the book that nobody has really ever seen before, I'll find it quickly, hopefully. A long time ago when I was at SPI, I did a game that never got published because of the SPI going down. But it was a game. This is the only cover of a game that never got published. A Conan the Barbarian game I did, but that's the only cover. I happened to I saved it as the company was going under. I found it in a garbage pile and took it. So that's the only copy of the cover of the game.
So before the cameras went on, in between talking about the deplorable state of American politics, we had a chat, and you said you wanted to make a distinction about historical war games as opposed to other types of games, and I assume as opposed to other types of war games. Can you explain that distinction and why you consider it important?
Sure. Did you ever see Star Wars?
I have seen Star Wars, all of the good ones and all of the bad ones.
All right, same here. And some of the more recent ones are pretty good. But what is the second word of the title?
War. Z.
There you go. So if you got a game on, and I have this game, really good game. I think it's called Rebellion, Star Wars Rebellion.
Yeah.
Great game, which I play, I enjoy, and I've played it many times. It's a war game, right? It's just a war game about something that never happened. Fair enough?
Yep.
A conflict game, there's a lot of games that have conflict. Even a lot of like if you think about it, even like Settlers of Catan has the thief, there's conflict. You're trying to interrupt what other people are doing. So there's a form of, conflict even in there. But a historical war game, in which is what the book is about and what I'm now going to describe, is a game that is specifically about an historical event that involves military operations at some level, right? So there's a great game called, what's the one it's like a woman. It's the woman's suffragette book and won a lot of awards appropriately. Votes for Women.
Votes for Women. Yeah.
Votes for Women is a conflict game. It's a political conflict game, but there's no military. I mean, there was some cops use, but there's no military, use in it. It's a political game, but it is a conflict game. But it's not and it's historical conflict, right? I mean, it's absolutely a historical game in every respect of the word, but it is not a military war game, right? It's a conflict game. So a historical war game is going to be something like the Battle of Gettysburg, or in a European contest, the Battle of Waterloo, which is a very popular war game topic. So when I say historical war game, that's what I'm talking about. And all the other things I'm not talking about.
But you've dabbled in games that deal with certainly more than conflict. Churchill, for instance, is as much a political game as it is a conflict. It is a war game, right?
Well, it is a political war game. So all I'm doing, there are forces that move on the map and determine the outcome of the game. And there is a war going on. And all you're doing is seeing the war from a higher level versus like like a advanced squad leader where you got a machine gun. This is the big picture, but it's a war game in all respect. Even though I said it wasn't a war game. By the way, I wrote in the very first 4 words: Churchill's not a war game, and then it won the best award for best war game that year on BGG. So nobody's paying attention anyway.
And it's that phrase that I'm going to completely misquote, but it's something like "war is politics by other means," something along those lines.
Well, you're talking about Clausewitz. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what Clausewitz actually said was, and by the way, there are at least 20 translations that are subtly different, but war is an extension of politics by other means is one of them. But there are others I like better that I've used before, but that's the one you usually hear.
And so can you ever separate the politics from the conflict in a game? Or should you, I guess? Is it important to have a pure conflict game?
So it depends on the scale. So what does scale mean in a war game? So let's start at the very tactical level. At the most tactical level, a war game is, a game with individual soldiers moving across some kind of map or landscape and, being opposed by enemy single individual soldiers. That's a very tactical game. You understand. And then as you start to go up, and tactical games kind of go up to what would be considered like, the regiment, where each piece is like a regiment. And, that's really in human history, the distinction between what is sometimes called flower warfare or irregular warfare prior to organized warfare, and regiments, regime, regimented, that word means a organization of soldiers who, adhere to like formations and orders and in a way that not like you'd see like in a hand-to-hand combat, like in the Iliad kind of thing.
And so who's the book for then? I mean, obviously, to some degree, writing a book is for oneself, but obviously it's a commercial product. It's not just a vanity thing. Who should be picking this book up, do you think?
Well, actually, I wrote it in the second sentence. The book is for my grandchildren. I wanted for them to have something, or my great-grandchildren, who I probably will never meet, if they ever ask, what was this guy doing, they have something to go to. Now, if everybody else wants to read it, that's great, but that's who I wrote it for. I wrote it for them. And
so, a love letter to your grandchildren. What is in that book that makes it that?
Well, I guess what it is by my writing down my method for doing something, if they were curious about what I was doing, this is how they would know what I was doing.
And so let's go back then. Let's talk about...
You understand, it's someday some kid's going to find out that I did like 100 games.
Right.
And they're going to go... And some of them, one of them might end up in their hands someday, and they're going to go, what the heck is this? And who is this guy I never met? And so it is... I don't know if it's a love letter, but it's certainly, although my granddaughter, August, was very excited that her picture's in the book. She thought that was very cool. So I already had a good impact on what I was trying to do.
And to what degree then is this book a culmination of your legacy, trying to sort of put together who you are as a game designer, what impact you've had in the wargaming world, what impact you've had in the wider gaming world?
So it is definitely the first thing you said. You honestly asked me this question. My wife was cracking. Remember this? My wife was cracking up right on the other side of the door. Legacy, as a historian, you don't get to write your legacy. I don't get to write my legacy. You can write my legacy because you're younger than I am. Presumably you'll be around, you go, oh, Mark's not around anymore. So at that point, you get to write my legacy and everybody else does. But that's not, the book is just there as a legacy of what I was doing. So it is that. But whether I did it well or not, that's up to everybody else to figure out.
And so you've dealt with various areas in the book that you're expert in. Thinking back to what amazes me when I read sometimes military history is the fundamental difference between the sort of pre-industrialized military world and the industrialized military world is the levels of participation of the troops. When you hit World War I, you've got super high levels of participation. 90% of people are participating in the battle. They're not running away. They're not hiding behind hedges. They're not leaving the battle. And when you're dealing with something like 5th century BC, how do you deal with our conceptions of what battles are and the reality of those times with things like participation, with things like technology, all of that sort of stuff?
Well, I want to. You're making a point that I don't necessarily agree with. So let me sort of pick it up differently.
Please tell me I'm wrong.
No, it's not a matter of right and wrong. Is I think these are not the right comments. There is perspective and lenses. Um, Once you get to a societal level, I'm not talking about like Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon running around in the woods kind of stuff. Once you get to having societies and they're organizing military forces for at least initially self-protection and then later on for more aggrandizement intent, uh, militaries are always an expression of the economics that produce them. So you know you can't one of the reasons in World War II why the United States was able to produce so much stuff so quickly was we had this big, automotive base to draw from, so we could make engines, which is the main part of the tank anyway, steel and all that stuff. So you can't make something. Nobody was going to beat the Mongols in a cavalry battle because these guys have been in the horse since the day they were born, basically, and everybody else was an amateur relative to them. So militaries are always the expression of their society. So things that that any country is good at. I mean, Germany is obviously has been an industrial for a long time, and they are quite expert at all of production means. Now, when you say participation, uh, sometimes there's no choice, right? There's nowhere to go. But that aside, when you actually look at it, as time went on, less and less people in society participated in the war itself.
Sure.
In fact, it's gone the actual historical trends in the other direction. If you look at like, even in World War II, I mean, yeah, when you get through a long war starts to drag everybody along, but early on, the United States military is, 2 million, 2 or 2.5, let's call it 3 million to round it up. 3 million soldiers, sailors, airmen, and women, of course. But the country has 330 million people in it. So that's kind of, what is that, like 1%, right? So 1% of the country is in the military, whereas in earlier periods you might have 40% of the country, like in the Civil War. Pretty much the South, 80% of the South participated in the American Civil War. So it's been going the other direction, actually.
And so, if a society, if a society's military reflects that society, what does today's military say about our society?
Well, no, I didn't say it's a reflection of the economic of the society. So but you can buy stuff from other people and give it to your people, but ultimately, I mean, look at what the Ukrainians are doing. I mean, the Ukrainians figured out they took basically hobbyist drone people and they've turned it into a part of their military. You can't do that if you didn't have a hobbyist group who knew how to build drones. I mean, it was already there. They just they scaled it. But you have to know how to do that. You have to have people who know how to, get little circuit boards and little propellers and put them together and make them do stuff and modify them and all that. I doubt if you could go down to the Amazon rainforest and find a tribe of people who are living sort of further back in technology. We're going to put together a drone force.
So coming back to the book then, when you approach a game, what is the purpose, as an historian and a game designer, what is the purpose of that game? Is it for enjoyment? Is it for knowledge? Or are these things just not mutually exclusive? Is asking to a distinction between the two essentially silly? They're for a series of purposes.
Well, I think that is all, one of the great questions. So I'll give you my answer, but you could probably ask 20 people in our hobby, and they'll give you 20 different answers. So take it for what it's worth. So when I do a war game, so I have a degree in history. I have written historical. I wrote a chapter in the history of war for the London Times book. I've written, I've written real historical, publications. Uh, so what I like about war games is for me, it's a better way to express my historical research than I think in a book. They're different. Okay. So if you read a military history, for instance, it's like in some ways it's a little bit. You ever read a book like a travelogue book? Like somebody, right? Journey. Somebody, this is my journey around the world or whatever. They're in magazine articles all the time, but people write books about that stuff. And what happens in that book is, they get in their car and they drive, and here's what it was like here, and here's what it was like there. Well, a military history has an element of that because they say, well, General Grant, took his army down this road, and there was this river. It's like a travelogue of moving military forces around, and of course, there's the battle and the strategy and all that kind of stuff, right? But ultimately, it's a description of moving around and running into each other and what happened at some very basic level. So what a war game lets you do is, instead of just reading about somebody driving a car, you get to drive the car.
Right.
You get to actually move the forces, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, now I know why he was delayed. There's a river here, and oh, look at this, and so you start to get into a much geography. The understanding of how military forces and geography interact is war games are far, far superior to a book in that regard, because it is, because your hands are on it, you're moving it around, and even in a computer version, you're still getting the same basic thing, except sometimes I think the computer makes it too easy, so you lose some of the learning, but still it's there. Okay, so that's another thing. I mostly do manual games, but I have done a lot of my games have been converted into computer games. They just take the manual game and make it a computer game, but same point. And so war games allow you to do all of that. And also war games get to give you a perspective. One of the things that, if you read, have you ever read a book about the Waterloo campaign in 1815?
I must confess I haven't.
I'm sad for you, but it's okay.
I will at some point. I've listened to podcasts about it.
Yeah, okay. Well, you got if you listen to podcasts about it, you got the basic idea.
Yeah.
So if you play a war, most of the war games, anybody who's done it, by the way, on BGG, I think I looked once, there's like over 75 games on the Battle of Waterloo, just the battle itself or the campaign, right? So that's, it's a fair number of, a lot of people have hit the topic, let's say. And when I did it for C3I magazine, the thing that I never felt was in any of those games was somehow it didn't feel, Napoleon's reputation and Napoleon's, propaganda seemed to have seeped through into a lot of these games, so that when you were fighting with the British and the Prussians, who, by the way, had between them, each of those armies was the size of the French army. So it's like they were attacking it, kind of like less than 1-to-1 odds, right? Which usually does not work well in an attack. And so what I did, Waterloo, I wanted you to feel what it's like to fight a desperate campaign as Napoleon, or try to get around your disadvantages of being two armies versus Napoleon as the other side, and to experience that narrative. And so when I do a game, going back to I think the first part of your question about a half hour ago, probably, I look at a game as having three big muscle movements, a lot of details, but let's just get to the big pieces, right? First off, topic. Everybody, anytime somebody says, I'd like to, if you and I were sitting in the same room, and I'm going to ask you the question right now, by the way, and what military history topic is of most interest to you? You may say none, but is there anything you've ever been interested in military history ever in your life?
Sure, absolutely. I'm really interested in ancient Greek battles. I find that period of history fascinating.
So once I hear, so I think the most important thing about a historical war game is you have interest in the topic. I've seen people, first war game is Advanced Squad Leader, which is like one of the most, intricate games one could imagine, right? And they get through it, why? Because they're interested in the topic.
Right.
Now, if I took you and put you in ASL, you're not interested in the topic, you'll just get your brains will leak out of your ears and you just won't be interested. But if I put you in a situation where it's about a topic you care about, you'll put up with whatever bumps in the road you run into because you want to know what's going to happen.
I mean, this is my theory about gamers, right? When I got into gaming, because I was really eager to learn gaming, I learned quite complex games, and I was willing to jump those hurdles, right? And I played Wingspan with someone the other night who's not interested in games, and Wingspan is objectively a simple game, and they not only did they find it complex and the concepts weird, I could sense they couldn't be bothered to learn them either. It was something they weren't into, and so we were fighting an uphill battle to engage them, right?
Exactly. You just made my point, so I don't have to go any further on that one. So topic is a big deal. The next thing is, what narrative do I want you to experience? So you mentioned earlier Churchill. So in Churchill, I wanted you to be one of the big three. How did Churchill or Stalin or FDR, not like a group of people, how did they deal with each other, deal with the war, and figure out how they could win the war and come out a little bit ahead in the post-war world? That's really the narrative. Right now, people, of course, have, I let people have lots of freedom, and they've done lots and lots of things, but I dealt with that in how the game evaluates your performance, and so that's one narrative. Now, another narrative says, my current game that just sold out, by the way, Rebel Fury, covers. I'm doing a series of so talking about, I got to give a definition. So we were talking about scale before, right? Mm-hmm. So tactical. Churchill's like it's the grand strategic level. This is the nosebleed level of presidents and prime ministers and I guess dictators. I mean, I don't know. That level is where you're at there. So there's obviously a big gap between individual soldiers and the guy who's leading the free world or fighting against fascism and imperialism. So when one considers that, and then in between, there's like theater commanders. So when we were talking about the Waterloo campaign, that's like a theater of war, even though because Europe's bigger than Belgium and where the fight was in Belgium. So that's a theater, and that's usually called the operational level. But in between those two, there's something called grand tactical, and you go like, what does that mean? So a famous writer who was a contemporary of Clausewitz, by the way, a guy named Baron Jomini. Have you ever heard of him?
I haven't.
Anyway, he is now passé for reasons that I'm not really sure of. But I'm going to actually the next book I'm going to write is going to be his impact, his theories and impact, and how it was taught to the American generals during the American Civil War is going to be my next book. But all that aside, but he defined the grand tactical level of combat as maneuver combinations prior to and during a battle.
Right.
Okay, so that's what it actually means. So when you're at that level, which is what Rebel Fury is at, that's why I gave that as an intro, is your General Grant or your General Lee or your General Bragg or you're the guy running the army at the battle level. You're not dealing with the tactical guys. You're not dealing where the gun batteries are. You're dealing with the overall maneuver of the army against the other guy's army. That's what the game is about. And the narrative I want you to be General Grant. That's who you are in the game. And I'm very big on, as close as possible, trying to give you a role in the game that's not, everything from soup to nuts, but it's got a very specific, control element. And then after you deal that, and the last piece of a design is, what am I going to give you agency over as a player? What is the agency that you're going to have over the situation? So, a game that we've talked about, I like this game Agricola. I think you've heard of that one. I think.
Sure.
So in Agricola, the topic is you're growing a family on a farm. I mean, that's kind of the basic. And I see my wife running around in the background there. And the narrative is, how one expands and deals with feeding and growing that family. And what you have agency over is, do I put up fences and buy a cow, or, do I cook the cow? Do I make a new stove, or, a new oven for cooking food and all those kind of things, right? Those are the things you have agency over. So in Rebel Fury, you have agency over how you maneuver your forces, how I take my pieces and move them relative to yours. The second thing I have agency over is when somebody attacks or defends, what elements of support? Do I give you extra artillery ammunition? Do I give you extra soldiers to guard your flanks? That kind of stuff. And those are the decisions you get to make in the game. And the way I come to why those decisions versus any other darn decisions I could come up with is because there's something called the official records of rebellion. So during the American Civil War, which is for people, this audience is not an American audience, and though I would tell you that unfortunately most American audiences couldn't tell you this fact either, by the way, so nobody should feel bad. From April of 1861 to April of 1865, 4 years, the United States had a civil war. And during the war, Congress Abraham Lincoln decided that they would collect up after the war all the records of the war, like anything that was written, reports, correspondence, whatever, and they were going to pull it all together for the public record. And Lincoln signed that. Now, obviously, he didn't see, and it started obviously immediately. They started collecting up this stuff while it existed, right? There were still hard copies of it because there's no computers, obviously, and luckily they did. But they didn't. It's 128 volumes, I think, 125 volumes, and they didn't complete it until about 1910. Right. So that's a long time and so it's got everything, but it's horribly organized because there would be periods where somebody would write a piece and they'd organize it one way, then they'd do another piece. So it's organizationally very tough unless you've worked with it, which I have. So when I do things in a game, I'm not trying to give you my perspective of how did General Grant think about battles, and how did he think about losses, and how did he think about what he could do and what he couldn't do? So I'm giving you player agency over certain things, but from the perspective of General Grant, what did he have agency over? And so that is the distinction between a historical war game and just, kind of any game, just having a good time. And so as a historian, I want to make sure that I'm letting you sit inside that narrative, not in something that approximates it. I try to go back to the original sources where I can.
And so you mentioned Votes for Women earlier. And Votes for Women has a lot of authorial voice in it. It has a certain element of polemic in it. Do you think that has a place in historical war games? You mentioned that you want to give Grant's point of view. Do you think there is a place for the designer's point of view, what their perspectives on certain elements are?
So, you asked a really good question early on, is who did I write the book for, right? You asked me that question. And the same question applies, who did you design the game for? And there is no such thing as a pure anything, right?
Right.
What did you ever read any Carr? He writes his book is called What is History? I read it when I was in grad school. And what he says is very important. He says that anything you get as a primary source, right, has already been curated. The guy or woman who wrote down something has already put their spin on it, even if it was unconscious. Because they tell you what they tell you, but what is the stuff they didn't tell you because they didn't think it was important, but maybe it was important, but it wasn't important to them, right? So sometimes it's what Carr says, it's more important sometimes to know who wrote it than what they wrote. Interesting point. So to the point you're making about Votes for Women, which, by the way, I want to be clear, I have not seen a copy. I mean, I saw the cover, but I've never seen the copy of the game. I don't even know how it plays. And I hope to rectify that because I am interested in the topic. I just haven't, I think when I wanted to go get a copy, it was out of print. And now that it's back in print, I just hadn't found one. But I'll be going to various conventions and somebody will have a copy and I'll play and it'll be great.
Yeah.
But so I don't want to respond to your question about Votes for Women because I don't have an opinion that's worthy of it. But in any game, there's going to be I have my perspective on what is it like to do grand tactics in the American Civil War. There have been, by the way, just so you know, I'm going to be turning 70 in about 10 days, something like that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But the point
you're about 25 years younger than Uli then.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I know Uli since he was Dirk is closer to my age than Uli is. Anyway, going back to, but the point of it is, I have had people write bad reviews about my games who weren't born when I did my first game. That's my point. So I've experienced bad reviews my whole career. So I don't care about that. Why I do it is because I want to put my view of history out there. And so people will criticize this game, isn't accurate, or it doesn't follow the history as I see it. And so there's tons of that debate going on when I put out a game. And I'm not claiming I have the right answer. I just have how I see it, right? That's all I can ever really say to anybody is this is how I see something. If you disagree, great. I will say that most of the people, I don't say most, most of the people who have disagreed with my view, when I publish why I did something, their response is usually more, well, I still don't agree. There's no factual comeback.
That's the internet, isn't it?
So I don't take that very seriously.
So Lisa, who surprisingly, if you knew her, is in the pub, wishes you a happy birthday for 10 days' time. She says she's a great fan of your work.
Oh, well, tell Lisa, thank you very much.
You can tell her she's watching the stream. So,
hi Lisa, thank you. And where is this pub, by the way?
It's in Wales, which must be fabulous. I adore Wales, and I'm sure Welsh pubs are spectacular.
Well, I have to tell you, I've only when I was 18, I did a sort of like before I had to go work as a lifeguard that year. A friend of mine we went around. We were mostly in Scotland, but when I was over by Bath, right? That's near the Welsh border.
It's close to Wales.
Yeah, well, no, but the point of the story is we purposely went one afternoon over the border into Wales, and we're in a pub, whatever's right over the border you went straight from Bath into Wales, there's a pub somewhere. And the thing I remember about it is how nice and wonderful the people in Wales were. And I could not believe that, except for me, and everybody in the pub except for me and my friend could sing like an opera singer. I couldn't. I mean, I've never heard so many good voices in a public gathering in my entire life.
As with the Celtic nations, Mark, they are absolutely lovely to everybody except the English. I'm sure we deserve it. Anyway,
you know something? I'm going to let that one go. Anyway, my hope is in the near future, and when you're my age, the near future has to be near. I do want to I want to go around Wales because I adore the little bit that I was there. It was fabulous. So I got to do more.
And apparently, Phil is fanboying at the moment, watching this stream. Phil is Lisa from the pub's significant other.
Oh well, I hope they're all having a good drink right now. I guess it's obviously evening there right now.
Yeah. It's 7:30. I mean, I think it's a little bit early to be in the pub, but who am I to comment? So anytime I want to drink, my wife goes, well, it's 5:00 somewhere. Indeed. So you mentioned Star Wars Rebellion.
Yeah.
And Star Wars Rebellion is a game of counterfactuals, right? What happened if the Empire...
Wait. It's not counterfactual.
No?
It's a history game about something that never happened. I mean, it's George Lucas's universe and his story represented in a game, but it's not counterfactual. There are no facts. Other than the facts.
Counterfactual according to the lore of Star Wars. So what happened if the Death Star attacked this planet and not this planet? And that sort of thing is what I mean. Yeah, right?
Well, yes, that's like any war game. I mean, look, there are a lot of war games. So I want to talk about this for a moment. If it's counterfactual thing, right? So if you wanted to, so one of the tenets of historicity in a historical war game, if that makes sense as a sentence, is that you can reproduce the history as it happened. You can, and some games take that so seriously that they basically put the game on. They create a game, but then they create all these special conditions so that you're kind of on a railroad. Think about yourself being on a train on a track, right? You're not in a car driving across the countryside, but you're on a track and you're going down that lane. Now, those games can be great fun, and you will get to experience the history in a different way. But your player agency is diminished by the fact that it's so, it's so important to get the history, get the storyline come out the way it did. You see my point? So this article will be my next article. It's already been laid down. It'll be the next C3I magazine. And for those, that's a wargaming magazine. It's published by Roger McGowan out of California. He's been doing it forever. So there's a battle called Chancellorsville. Have you ever heard of this battle?
I've heard of it. I couldn't tell you anything about it.
So it is considered Robert E. Lee. There are a lot of, Robert E. Lee and how he's viewed in the United States and where you live and all that. I don't want to get into all that, but Robert E. Lee, in the American Civil War, he may not have been the best general in the world, but he was one of two of the best generals in the American Civil War. Forget about whether he had been better than some Russian guy or some English guy. That's not the point. In the war, in the war against the people he was fighting against, he was one of the best generals. That there's no argument about that. And Chancellorsville is this very famous battle that is considered his, masterpiece, the part that makes his reputation, that kind of situation. And a lot of games, and it's a very complicated battle, and I won't go into the details, but anybody who's interested, go look it up on Wikipedia. I wrote a whole article about it, but the key point is a lot of people write a lot of special rules to have certain things happen, right? However, when I did my original research, I went back there. The guy who lost the battle, a guy named General Hooker, was nowhere near as good a general as Lee, but he wasn't a terrible general. He just wasn't, he got into the playoffs, but he couldn't make it to the World Series, and you want to put it into that context. And he wrote Lincoln about his strategy. And once I read that, what he actually intended to do, I didn't need any special rules. I just said, hey, leave it up to the players. Hooker figured this out, and Lee's got and I give you the same exact problems that they had with do whatever you want. And the game can come out the same way. And yet, on the other hand, it can go a lot of different ways if you don't play it skillfully. And I also believe in games, by the way. Doing a game where skill doesn't matter doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, by the way.
You might watch a documentary then, right?
Exactly. I came my first war game, not first historical war game, is chess. And I played chess from the age of 6. The only game I ever played, strategy game I ever played from the age of 6 till about 12 was chess. So, and the only reason you play a game of chess is to win. There is no other purpose to chess other than to win. There's no, they don't give you prizes for runner-up in a chess tournament, by the way.
So I'm going to move on now to some questions I've got from people on my Discord. If anyone has questions for Mark,
I hope Lisa has a question, because I want to talk to Lisa, and I assume a significant other goes by her first name, but Phil. I'd like to hear from Lisa. What has she got?
Yeah, Lisa and Phil ask a question. Uli does have a question. He wants to know, and please feel free not to discuss your personal plans on the internet, but Uli wants to know if you're coming to LaRioCon next year.
Yes, that's the one in
Portugal.
You said it. That's the one in Portugal, yes? Yeah, I am working that out. So, yes, I'm going to go to, for anybody who cares, there's a game convention in Rome that they've invited me to, and they're bringing out an Italian version of Churchill. So they asked me to come. And who doesn't want to go to Rome?
Right, indeed.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to Rome. That's May 27th. And then I wrote Uli and I said, is there another convention around that while I'm already in Europe that I could jump? So my wife and I plan to go to Rome, do that, and then we're going to fly to Lisbon, see what we can see there, and then she may or may not accompany me to LyraCon, but I will go. And if she doesn't want to go to Lyra, I'll just put her on a plane and send her home.
LyraCon is the best convention of the year. You'll see me there in a terrible state. But
why?
Well, because I'm going to be drinking solidly for 4 days, Mark.
Oh, well, this I can do.
This we can do. So, Matt Coates.
So, yes, it is my plan to be at LyraCon. Yes.
Excellent. So, Matt Coates asks, what does Mark think are the main barriers of entry into historical games for other hobbyist board gamers? I think you've kind of addressed this a little bit, but...
I will address it. So, you say Mark Coates, as you said his name is?
Yeah. Matt
Coates. Mark, what's that?
Matt Coates.
Matt Coates, I'm sorry. Matt, what I would say to you is it's topic. I mean, what is the thing, if you were if if you are or somebody else wants to get into a historical war game, ask the question that you told me that the thing you were most interested in, and I've done a couple of games like that. So you could play Peloponnesian War, you could play Pericles, but there are, by the way, I can name. There's Polis. There's another game called Pericles by Martin Wallace. There's at least I can at least think of 20 games on that topic, right? So
Also,
Great
another
Battles of
game I
History, I
have
covered all the battles.
another game I have on my shelf that I got directly because I was very interested in the historical period is this one, which
I can't see it. So,
oh, you can't see it, of course. Sorry, it's Gandhi. It's the coin game Gandhi.
oh yeah, great game. Now to be clear, I've only played it once when it first came out, but it's a fascinating game. It was done by Madison, right?
No, I will look on the
What's the
books
game
right
designer?
now. Bruce Mansfield.
Mansfield, right? Bruce Mansfield. Sorry, and I know his brother also. They're great guys. So yeah, it's great, and it's very interesting take because the non-violent, the Gandhi thing, and you got the British, and it's great. It's a fabulous game. So there's a good example of getting into something that you're interested in the topic.
And I would be very surprised if there's no area of history that someone is not interested in. There must be something. I would delight to play a game on the English Civil War, for instance. I'm incredibly fascinated by that period.
Okay, so the English Civil War, you should get a copy of Unhappy King Charles from Charles Basic. That's a fabulous game, and it's both historical and very good fun and interesting as hell. So yes, I would there. And Charles, well, that one's been out of print so long. But Unhappy King Charles is about to come back into print, so grab a copy this time.
Also, I want to do something on the sort of non-conformist elements of the English Civil War, the diggers and the levelers and all of that sort of stuff. I think that would absolutely be fascinating.
Yeah, I think Charles in that Unhappy King Charles, there may be a couple of cards around that, but it's not not the theme of the game.
Yeah, I played Gerard Winstanley, the head of the diggers, in a play once, so.
There you go.
So this is same Matt Coates. Do you think the genre can or should do more to encourage gamers of a different stripe? Eurogamers, for instance.
Well, first off, let me put this in perspective, okay? The last time I looked, which is now pre-COVID, the industry was around $75 billion of what I'll call games. But only $2 billion of it was board games.
Sure.
So I'm answering from the board game perspective. I think people have so little free time in this world. Everybody's got a job, and they got a lot of things going on. So I think unless you're interested in it, I don't see any need. I mean, I've never felt it, need to try to win people over. People go where people want to go.
Sure.
You can't. Anybody who thinks they can manufacture a hit is always going to be wrong. And we're always surprised by the ones that are hits. There it is. So I don't worry about that kind of thing. If somebody's interested, they'll find their way. There's plenty of opportunities. But if not, Euro games are great. I mean, again, I'm not big on the big labels, but I like my Agricolas and my Settlers of Catan just as much because I can play those. My wife is interested in those, so. I like playing games with her. She likes Splendor. That's a great little game.
It is. So Lisa asks, she's writing from the pub. My question to Mark would be, when can you come to Wales, and should I get in cider or beer?
Oh, what was it for? I know what beer is. What was the other one?
Cider. It's an alcoholic drink made from apples.
Oh, I mean, I'm from New York, of course. I mean, apple cider.
Yeah. But the alcoholic kind.
I love apple cider. I find that I would probably go with beer, though. Not because I don't like apple cider, but you can only drink so much apple cider.
Not if you're Lisa. Believe me, I've witnessed this.
Oh, okay. I won't go there. But I do like beer. But I'm more, believe it or not, the thing I really like. I'm a Scotch drinker, actually.
I agree.
Well, you can agree or not, but I am.
No, I agree with you that Scotch is wonderful. So why is there a divergence between how an historical games rulebook is written versus a traditional Euro game? And this is Matt again.
Matt's asking. I wish I actually knew the answer to that question. Uh, so I think that. So let's start with intricacy. Okay, so I did Rebel Fury, by the way, has less rules than Agricola. Just to be clear.
Right.
Okay, it is not. So length of rules, it's how intricate is the game is the bigger issue to me than whether it's just, there's a view that a historical game is more complex, it takes longer to play and all that kind of stuff, right? That's just, urban legend stuff, but that's how people think. So you can't, that's the way it is. uh, but what I learned a long time ago, unless you're, going to start doing like, traveling faster than the speed of light or approaching it, 3 hours is 3 hours, right? We're all moving 1,000 miles an hour, so we're all in the same time frame, and 3 hours at moving 1,000 miles an hour is the same. So every one of my games has, if even if it has a bigger campaign element, there's a solid 3 hour gaming experience in every one of my games. I have played. It could take 3 hours to play Agricola sometimes. It could take, I've played a lot. What was that game? Far West something or other. Western Trail. Western
Great
Trail.
Western Trail. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I played Western Trail. It took us 5 hours. You know, much longer. So the thing I've learned is it's how hard is it to teach the game is often what the real question is.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, I think that's just a matter of how good is the person. Somebody in the room has to know how to play. Unless you all learned how to play it, you're learning it in real time. It'll take forever. But if somebody's learned how to play it, how good a teacher are they? And I find that I don't teach anything. If you want to see what I'm talking about, I mean, it's based on the same thing. But if you know Fred Saval, I know that, right?
Yeah.
So Fred, we were supposed to do a live stream of a game with a guy who's medically challenged at the moment, and he's in a tough situation, and he had to cancel at the last minute. And so Fred's like, "Well, should we cancel?" I said, "No. What do you want to do? I'm free. I freed this time up." So we did a teach on For the People, which is a Civil War game of mine, one that I'm particularly fond of also. And Fred had never read the rules. He had a box. He had the game, but he didn't know it. He knew it from Adam. And I more or less taught enough of it in 10 minutes that we could play, and then we kept playing. And I every time he didn't know what to do, I said, "Here are your three choices." So you have to. So if you're trying to, no human being that I'm aware of can take more than about 10 minutes of, there was actually a TED talk once about it. Human brain kind of fries out at about 10 minutes, by the way, unless you're very, some people are more intelligent or better, but 10 minutes is about how much your brain can absorb at one time. So using that as my basic method, I never tell anybody more than about 5 minutes of instruction before we just start playing. And then things become evident by themselves. And again, if the person thinks that, Fred was like trying to make these decisions, I said, "Fred, there is no universe where you could beat me in this game. It doesn't exist. I've been playing this game for over 25 years. Yeah. I've played it hundreds of times. And this is your first time you think you're going to have a chance? That's ridiculous." So once you get that off the table, we're just playing this so you can learn it. Then you don't have to go through all that stuff. And then any game is teachable to anybody if they're interested. And you go back to your wingspan. Wingspan, I mean, I bet you I could get my granddaughter who's in second grade. She loves looking at birds. I bet you I could get a game of Wingspan and she'd play it.
Yeah,
because she's interested in birds.
So Phil asks, what game that you've designed are you most proud
of? It's a toss-up between For the People and Empire of the Sun.
And why?
I like playing them.
Are they simply the most fun?
Why did you write the book? I said I wrote it for my my grandchildren. You say, why do I design any game? I design them for me. I design the games that I want to play, and then if anybody else wants to, that's great. That's how I look at it.
So, K Sweeney 36 asks, I have Tank on Tank for playing with my youngest son. Lots of Euro games have a kid/junior version. Do you think war or historical games could do more of that kind of stuff?
So I did a game which also I'm very proud of, but I don't play as often just because I don't have anybody to play with. Called called Washington's War,
Hmm.
and I did a game called Gettysburg and C3 Both were intended to be introductory games. And so there are games that are less intricate and they lack the less intricacy of it. But I also remember I also did a game called Ribbit, which has nothing to do with anything, so just like a maneuver game with frogs. So anything's possible. But I would lean toward like a Washington. But then I don't know what country this gentleman's from or woman from. I don't know what the handle means. But this person, if they're not from America, they may not be very interested in the American War of Independence. Again, another war that most people in the United States know nothing about, other
You
than
mean the
just
you mean the American betrayal of Britain? Is that the
yes,
war you referred
exactly.
to? Good. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll come
And
back to us one day, Mark. It's fine. You'll
I
realise
had
your
guys.
mistake one
I'm sad, and sometimes I'm sad we left. No, I'm not. Well,
Certainly not at the moment. Don't be.
well, there's a book called The Last King of America by Andrew Roberts. He's a very excellent historian, and he contacted me. I'm in the acknowledgments of the book, and the question he asked me was, in wargaming, basically he's asking, do the British ever win? What is the chances of the British winning the American Revolution? Revolution. Yes, American Revolution, not the Civil War. The American Revolution. And because Washington's War and We the People before it have decades of tournament experience, I could tell them with some accuracy it's about 55-45 Americans to British.
Okay.
And when the British win, they tend to win early. And the longer the war goes, it favors the Americans.
So we're going to finish on this question because this one has been debated on my Discord now for a week. And this is again from Matt Coates. And people have been talking about this a lot. And so is there a line that you wouldn't cross when selecting an historical event to design a game around?
Yes.
And what would that line be? Or are there, obviously there are various lines, I assume.
I'll be honest with you. There are a lot of narratives in history where it's about human suffering. I'm not interested. War is about human suffering, but I'm looking at it more from a military strategy. So there's plenty of human suffering in any war game. Let's just be clear about that. But one where the intent of the game is to examine human suffering doesn't feel like there's a lot to be learned there. Human trafficking is a topic I wouldn't want to cover.
Sure. Let's
start with that. There you go. That doesn't interest me. There's a lot of topics that are, look, I was asked, some people, I'm doing a game on the beginning of the Russia-Ukrainian war called Defiance, and a lot of people were saying too soon and all this stuff. And you got to remember, I come from a tradition. I worked in the Pentagon for over 30 years. I've been dealing with this stuff forever, so I take it very seriously. But as a citizen or a person who wants to understand if your government's making decisions about things, you might want to know what's really going on at another level than what's in the newspaper. And so there's that dimension of it. But in all cases, it's about military things. There's human suffering always involved, and you have to get around that, be cognizant of it and be respectful of that. But there are topics that go even beyond that. What's the point?
Do you think there's a squeamishness on the part of people that games, it's the I don't feel good about playing the Nazis thing, that you play games and,
I'm Jewish, and the only time I play the Germans in a World War II game is when I'm playing somebody who's never played the game before, is not very experienced, and if somebody doesn't know how to drive the German military train, then the game doesn't do anything. It won't go anywhere, so the experience won't be very interesting. So I tend to shy away from that, but I have. It's not my favorite thing to do. But in the American Civil War, I'm not. You play the Confederacy, but what are you doing? You're playing the side that's trying to keep slavery, right? So there's always a reason that these things go on. But I come to a very simple. In America, there's a big thing now. I don't like the book, we should ban it. My answer is, if you don't like the book, don't ban it, don't read it. You don't have to read it. If you don't like the TV channel and they're showing content you don't like, don't watch the channel. And if there's a game about a topic that you don't like, don't buy the game. But what I don't like is when people take their view as being the view that must be enforced on others. Just move on. That's all I'm saying.
Excellent. Well, that seems like an absolutely perfect place to end on. So I'd just like to say
Okay.
thank you ever so much, Mark, for coming on
Pleasure.
and giving this channel some intellectual heft.
Oh God! You really, it's a low bar. I'm taking it.
Well, I'm usually the one on it, so the bar couldn't be lower. So with that, thank you ever so much for your time, and fingers crossed we'll see each other in Portugal over altogether too much alcohol.
Okay, that sounds like a great plan. I'll buy you a drink.